Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to have such a diverse audience. I love the Animas audience. It's always so rich, and I mean that in terms of culture, geographically, backgrounds. That's what we want in our coaching communities, diversity. So it's great to have you today. A pre-warning before we start. I've got a 20-week-old kitten sitting next to me. She's very needy, and I've said that she can come and attend the lecture today. I've had a word with her that she's got to be on her best behaviour, but I do apologise if she wakes up and starts jumping around. She'll be told off if she is. So just a pre-warning there. So today I am going to talk to you about organisational coaching, and the reason I guess I am excited about this is because I still think organizational coaching is bubbling beneath the surface. We're seeing more and more of it. But I guess if you've done your coaching training, it might be that you started like me in a training that was more designed for a private enterprise, a private practice. And then when I went into the world of organizational coaching, I realized, oh, this is a bit different and it needs handling in a different way. And that's because of the systems that we work within in organizations and the relationships. So today we're going to look at deepening our understanding of the different coaching roles, because within an organization, coaches can show up in sort of a different with different roles and responsibilities. There's not just one type. I'm also going to look at how to contract in organizational coaching, because that can look quite different. We're going to try and understand, as coaches in the workplace, we have a responsibility to show return on investment to our sponsors. So how can we do that? And then finally, we're going to look a little bit about a little bit at CVP Group, which is the organization I'll tell you a bit about in a minute that I run with my brother, and how you can access funding for organizational coaching training. And that should say through the apprenticeship levy, which I'll talk to you about a bit later. So if you want to link up with us, our social media platforms and websites are there. A little bit about me to start off with. So thanks for the introduction, Izzy. Izzy sort of given the main headlines there. And my journey as a coach really has started, I'd say, quite recently in my career. I've been into teaching and education for most of my career, so that's why I put the picture of the teacher there. I started when I was 21, came out of university not really knowing what to do, a degree in English and Spanish. Okay, may as well train to be a teacher and teach English. So I trained to be a teacher, and I loved it for a large part of my career. I stayed in education, teaching in secondary schools for about 17 years. And I worked in a real mix of schools, from really privileged independent schools. I taught in the Middle East, in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, in British international schools. And then I came back to the UK and I served some really disadvantaged communities in Greater Manchester. Towards the latter part of my career, I reached burnout in teaching. It's an incredibly demanding job, especially when you're serving those really deprived communities. The most disadvantaged corners of our society need the most help, but they can also take the most from us. And I reached a point, I think, one day where I came home from a full day's work. And I remember getting to work at 6:30, and I didn't stop until 6 o'clock that evening. I was on duty in the morning. I had a form. Then I was teaching all day. I was on another duty. I had a senior management meeting. And in between that, in the evening, in between that, you've got all these pressures. And I remember just coming home and I was like, this is too much for me now. And I reached burnout and I decided, right, it's time just to have a break from education. But in that period, I started to explore coaching more because I'd done some training on it previously when I worked abroad. I did a PG cert in coaching and mentoring. And then I started coaching as a coachee. And I realized that I wish I'd had access to that as a teacher more in my early career, and especially in the parts where I was burning out. And I didn't, because it just it just wasn't a thing. It's getting more of a sort of service that's being provided to teachers in the sector, but it wasn't. And I remember thinking, as I started to engage in coaching more, wow, I wish I'd had this sooner. This is what I've needed all along. And I realized the power of it, just the power of someone holding a space for a professional who had so many demands on them, and very little opportunities to speak and to explore and to just slow that brain down. And I thought, I feel like I want to do something with coaching. And particularly, I wanted to make sure that I was still serving the education community that I'd served for most of my career, because I felt every teacher deserves a coach, and I was sort of on a mission to make that happen. So I did my Animas training because I thought I'd like some more training in coaching. I'd done some, but I wanted to sort of top that up. And the Animas training reignited my fire, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. I really need to do something with this, because now I've got my coaching skills updated. I've also got my training skills as a teacher. I know how to teach. I know how to curriculum design. Maybe I could merge the two, but I wasn't sure how. Meanwhile, I left teaching. So this was before I started the Animas training, and I didn't have a plan. I just thought it needs to end now. That's what I decided with my coach, and it'll all work out. Something will come up. And my brother was running CVP as training provider at the time. And at that time, CVP was an apprenticeship training provider, and it was providing training for warehouse delivery, recruitment, some very small level 3 leadership qualifications. And there was no coaching provision. And he needed a quality manager and asked me if I'd come and step in. And I said, I know nothing about apprenticeships, Adam, but you know what? I need a bit of money. I know a bit about education. I know a lot about education. Let's give it a go. And I'll just work for you part-time while I figure out what to do. So I went to work for him, and didn't really have any interest in the training that he was delivering. Warehouse delivery, recruitment wasn't my thing. But as I got to know apprenticeships more and more, I realised when I was doing my research that there was a funded level 5 coaching professional qualification. So I thought, this is interesting. I've paid thousands and thousands of pounds for my coaching training over the years. Imagine if I'd had access to this funded training. And I said to him, I know how to write curriculum and I know how to train and deliver. I think I could design this and we could deliver it as a qualification. So he was like, well, give it a go then, let's see. And I said, I'm willing to stay with you a bit longer if I can run with this. So we trialed it a couple of years ago, our first cohort. It's quite funny looking back. It was a really small cohort of 5, and I was literally finding anyone and everyone who would do it. I got my best friend's sister to join. One of our internals did it. My auntie came on it. You know what I mean? It was just anyone, let's trial it out. And we had a very small cohort in the early days, and it was a success. It really sort of engaged the markets that we were serving, and it's grown exponentially since. So we have completely redesigned and restructured our organisation. Now I'm a partner with Adam, and we run CVP together as a specialist coaching training provider. So now we discontinued all the other qualifications, and we just decided, let's niche down on coaching. So now we provide organisational coaching training predominantly through the apprenticeship levy, which is funded, to organisations in England. We also offer some commercial training if the apprenticeship isn't right for you, because it's not right for everyone. It's a tough qualification. But we are predominantly in apprenticeships, coaching apprenticeships. So that's a bit of context around who I am and what I do. On the sideline, I obviously still wanted to carry on my own coaching practice. So I developed a practice specializing in my passion, which is supporting women. And I'm a career and leadership coach for women, leaders, existing and aspiring. And I help women to challenge the gender pay gap, dreadful gender pay gap, especially in education, to fight limiting beliefs around common themes like imposter syndrome, to manage things like the motherhood penalty, which happens when women go on maternity leave and come back and regress in their careers because of all the odds that are stacked against them. So on the side, that's my passion, supporting women. So I've got I feel really lucky that I get to combine my skill set as a coach and an educator and also work with some incredible women. So that's what we do at CVP Group. And really today, I want to talk about our mission and how we are sort of implementing that, because what we're trying to do at CVP is to democratize and professionalize coaching. Because, as you probably know as a community, coaching can be expensive for the coach to keep upskilled and the coachee to buy the coaching services. So how are we going to create coaching cultures in our organizations where more people can access coaching at a reasonable cost or funded? And how can we make sure that the standard of coaching is high? So we're not because of the cost that we're bringing down, we're not compromising the standard. Because like this CHRO, this global technology company say, democratizing coaching is key for coaching itself, yes, but also for breaking down other challenges and barriers that exist for us at work. So today is a little bit about how do we create coaching cultures, but also at the end, a little bit how are we going to democratize it as well through funded training. The way we started to do this is by partnering with some really amazing organizations, because we realized to access the markets who serve disadvantaged communities, we need to partner with organizations that work closely with them. So some of our partners are here. For example, Women Ed is an organization that supports women leaders in education, because the majority of teachers in England are men, but the majority of the workforce are women. So something's going wrong there if the women aren't getting into those leadership roles. So Women Ed is a charity all about trying to empower women to get in those leadership roles. And because of my education background, we've ended up partnering with quite a lot of education organisations. And we're hoping to set up a Women Ed coaching community where we can coach women to become the leaders that they deserve to be and break down those barriers. We don't just work with educators, we work with a range of sectors. So 68 People is a hospitality training organisation, and we're partnering with them to bring coaching into the hospitality space. And of course, we work with the Department of Education, which basically gives us the funding. So we're gatekeepers of taxpayers' money. We can't sort of see that and hold that lightly. We have to take it seriously because we're being given money to train you, and we have to make sure the right people are on our course accessing the funding and taking it seriously. So our big partner is the Department of Education, because they're the ones giving us the money and making sure that we're hitting the standards to receive that money. So enough about me, more about you now. I'm going to ask Izzy to open the chat in a second, because what I would like to know is which best describes you today. So You might be one of these, or you might be more than one, or none of these descriptions might fit you, which is fine. The internal coach is someone who coaches within an organization and works within the organization. So you've got the skill set to coach, but you've also might have a different role like a HR professional. So that's the internal coach. The external coach is more your executive, associate coach. So you don't work within the organization, but you provide external coaching to the employees. Or you're a coaching leader. So you don't formally coach, but you've got some coaching training and you embed and interweave coaching within your daily leadership role. Maybe you put some in your one-to-ones, and when you're facilitating team meetings, you put some coaching skills in there. So it's sort of embedded in your role as a leader. So you're either one of those, more than one of those, all of those, none of those. I'm curious to see how you would describe yourself, just so I can gauge the audience today. So if Izzy could open the chat, and then I can just have a look. If you could just write down what you would describe yourself as. Great. So we've got some mixes here. We've got some internal coaches, external coaching leaders. Great. Building external coach. Yeah, so we've got someone who's 2, but building on all 3. Great. Great. Lots of internal coaches, which is great to see. I was expecting lots of external coaches, but that is great to see. Aspiring coaches, being all 3. Also executive coach, CEO, leadership coaches. Brilliant. Amazing. Right. So we've got a real mix. And I just wanted to gauge the audience there to see sort of like who I'm speaking to. So that's going to be the focus today, just looking at these 3 roles. I want us to consider, though, before we delve into these roles, why is organisational coaching so important? Randstad ran a survey in 2022, and they came up with some interesting findings. And I think this is probably a lot higher now, because they found that 50% of organisations rely on direct managers to coach. So that means that our organisations are expecting the managers to coach their team members, but the question there is, who's training them? And probably now, I would say that 50 is higher. Because I think you are expected as a manager in an organisation to have some kind of coaching skills. It might not even be called coaching skills, but it's the kind of principles that underpin coaching. Now, only 35% of boomers hoped an employer would offer coaching in the future. And I put that on because I want to contrast it with what the younger generations are asking for, because that goes up. 50% of millennials hoped an employer would offer coaching in the future. And I think if you go to the Gen Z and the younger generations, more of them are expecting it. It's sort of, I think, shifting that trend of the younger generations caring a bit less about money and the material. They want connection, belonging. They want to be coached. And I think because more demand for it, there's more demand for it, we have to make sure that our managers are equipped to do it. But these 3 roles that I've just referred to have their pros and cons. So let's consider the external coach. We're going into an organisation and we are providing external coaching. I wonder if Izzy could open the chat for this one, because what I would like you to do is in the chat, I'd like you to write down, what do you think some of the pros are of being an external coach? What are some of the advantages? Yes, good. So that's a quite you do tend to have more objectivity, don't you, as an external coach? Fresh perspective, yeah. You've not got any preconceptions, no hidden bias, none of the direct report dynamics that you have to sort of manage carefully. You've got that distance from the organisation. And yeah, there's an ability to hold more stakeholders to account because you've got more of a sort of a distance oversight and perhaps more interactions with those. And people are more likely to be honest with you because they're not worried about conflict of interest. Great. So we've got some great ideas there of what the pros are, but there are some cons of external coaching. So what are the cons of external coaching? What are the disadvantages of having an external coach? If we could write some in now. Yes, you don't know the culture, which could be a pro, but perhaps could be a con if your style doesn't align with that culture. You've got to build the relationship and trust. So although someone might feel like you might feel like you can be more honest than an external coach, actually, you're starting from scratch with that relationship. So you've got more legwork to do in building that trust. It takes longer to understand the context. Maybe you don't understand the politics, but maybe that's a good thing. So can you see how now some of the cons that are showing up, you could actually say are an advantage? No return on investment necessarily unless the contract is longevity. That's an interesting one. Does an external coach have to show return on investment? I would argue perhaps, yes, if you're a sponsor and you're employing an external, you would want them to show some kind of return on investment, which I'll show you how to do later on in this workshop. Great. So we can see that there's some pros and cons of the external coach. What about the internal coach? Let's have some pros of the internal coach. So some of the advantages of being an internal coach. Yeah, so you're familiar with the company culture, which could be an advantage because you know how to adapt your style to suit that. Yes. Someone has put there, more accessible, aren't they? To some extent, because they're there all the time. You can build on existing relationships. Yeah. You may already know personality drivers to coach the employees. Yeah. Good. And some of you, I don't know if you've mentioned this because I've not seen it, but it's not as costly because the person already works within the organisation, though some of you might say you are still taking the time away from them. But yeah, it's sustainable and responsive. What about the cons of an internal coach? So what are we looking at some of the disadvantages? What are some of the cons of having internal coaches? Bias, conflict of interest, which we're going to discuss today. Conflict of interest, bias, too familiar with company culture, same echo chamber, limited breadth of experience, that's an interesting one because they've already got so much to juggle with other responsibilities. Are they going to be as skilled as an external coach who's solely focusing on coaching? Yeah, good. So some of the pros and cons there of the internal coach. And then we've got the coaching leader. So that's someone who works within the organisation and they don't have an official coaching role, but they're using it in their day-to-day role as a coach, as a leader, So what are some of the advantages of having leaders who are embedding and interweaving coaching approaches in their day-to-day role? What are some of the cons of that? Yeah, leading by example, building future leaders. Yeah. more likely to embed a coaching culture because everyone's sort of role modeling and walking the talk as well. Better leaders generally, yeah, I think so. I think if you just take away the word coaching and just think about the principles, non-judgment, unconditional positive regard, non-directiveness, those are great leadership skills. But there are some disadvantages. What are some of the cons of having leaders embed coaching in their day-to-day practice? Yeah, too close to the direct reports to do it effectively. So too close to direct reports. Blurred boundaries. Yeah, so it's almost like, how are you going to manage that? Shifting between coaching and mentoring and training and all the other sort of managerial roles. So blurred boundaries, trying to be clear with your team when you're in coaching mode and contracting. Yeah. We need to be more conscious of the hat you're wearing, conflict of interest. Yeah, good. And also, if they're juggling other roles and skill set, are they going to be, is it going to be sustainable? Are they going to be able to upskill themselves regularly like coaches do with supervision if they've got other demands on them? Yeah, great. So, and the quality, yes, I think Hayley, you just sort of basically summarize what I'm trying to say there, which is the quality of coaching could be compromised if you've got other roles to fulfill. How ethical with the ICF if not supervised externally? Yeah, how are we going to monitor that? Brilliant. So we've got those three roles, and I think it's clear to see that there's no sort of this is the best, because there's pros and cons of each. And I'm going to contradict myself now because I'm going to ask you, which is the best? So you're running an organization, you're senior stakeholder, and you've got a choice to make about where you put your budget, because we've all got limited budgets. And you've got a choice. Do you put your money at the moment with your internal coaches, your external coaches, or just light touch coaching training so that your leaders have some coaching skills to embed? Where would you put your money if you're a senior leader in your organization? If maybe if the chat's still open, that's great. People can just write down where they would put their money. And I know you could say a mix, but I'm going to ask you to pick your lane here. I'm going to ask you to pick your lane. And I know it's situational as well, but I'm just trying to push you here to say, like, if you had to say which one was the best, which one would you go for? So external seems to be quite popular. Start with the needs. Yeah, analysis. Yeah, definitely. I mean, the sensible answer here would be to do an analysis and look at the needs, but I'm just trying to push you a little bit here to pick a lane to just consider a point that's coming up on my next slide. External, depends. Pure coaching, external. So external seems to be the one, which is interesting because Carol Wilson, I don't know if any of you come across Carol Wilson, she is quite an expert in organisational coaching. She's worked with big organisations like Richard Branson's Virgin and helped set up coaching cultures there. And she's written a great article, and you just need to Google it. I'll put the reference on in a minute, called Creating a Coaching Culture, a 10-point plan by Carol Wilson. And it's a really great article on how to set up a coaching culture. And she basically says, if you've not got the budget for all, she would recommend starting with this one, internal coaching. This one sort of as well, before external coaching. And I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm just saying this is what sort of expertise has come up with, because Carol Wilson says, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. So this proverb captures this idea that actually, if we train up the people already in the organisation in coaching, it's more sustainable, because external coaching is expensive and it's not permanent. But if we put our resources, because we're short on them in the people, and we upskill them, we've got a more chance of sustaining a coaching culture than if we start with external coaching and our budgets are low. Best fit or best or ideal situation is to have a bit of all three, and have that choice and be able to do your SWOT analysis and go, right, okay, let's put the external coaching in this area, the internal coaching in that area, and train up this team in coaching leadership. But it's time consuming and it's expensive. So if you are interested, I would highly recommend you just Google creating a coaching culture, a 10-point plan by Carol Wilson, and that comes up as one of the top searches, and it's a really interesting read. So moving on now to the contracting part, because when we are creating a coaching culture and acting as an internal or an external coach, we can't deny or ignore the fact that this is a relationship with a third party. It's something you have to be aware of. So if you are, like me, a private independent coach, you'll probably just be used to that coachee contracting relationship. But when you move into organizational coaching, the contracting becomes a bit more complex because you've got that third party. And what you've got to realize is this needs managing sensitively, because there's more than one person involved. And I would highly recommend, if you haven't got it, Jenny Rogers' book, Coaching Skills, which I'm going to refer to now, has got a really great chapter. So round about page 143 to 148, there's a good section on organizational coaching that I'm going to refer to now. And I like the fact that she highlights that executive coaching, which essentially is like external coaching, there's different terms for it. She said that it's fundamentally a business proposition where client and coach work together for the benefit of a third party. So this is slightly different to what we're used to as private coaches who just contract with a coachee. We've got to see, right, we're going in a business and we've got a third party involved, and it's their sort of time and investment that we're taking. So we've got an obligation to show a return to that third party. And that actually throws up some problems for coaches, especially if you're not used to that third party dynamic. So points to consider are things like, well, how will confidentiality work? How will accountability and responsibility work? What are the organizational goals? And do they align with the coachee's goals? And who owns the goals? And how often do we have these sessions if it's on business time? And how's that decided? And is there an existing coaching culture already, or is this something quite new? How do I show return on investment? What are the contentious issues here that are going to throw up problems in this coaching session? Like the coachee says to you, I don't want to work here in this organization, and that's what I want to discuss today. Have you contracted with the managers around this before you started the relationship, the partnership? Because this could come up, and this conversation needs to be had around contentious issues. For example, highlighting there's a possibility that some of your coaches might want to leave. What are your thoughts around this to the senior stakeholders if this happens? Because this is a probability. We're coaching people to be their authentic selves. So there's lots of points to consider, and some of the common themes that have come up in my work with organisational coaches are as follows. So you've got sort of the manager who isn't engaged. So just sort of, yeah, coach, that's fine. Just I don't really want much input. But you've also got the manager who is too involved and wants too much involvement in the coaching. You've got the coachee who doesn't agree with the goals that the manager wants. And then the manager doesn't agree with the goals that the coachee wants. Senior management only selecting underperformers for coaching, which creates a stigma for coaching because people see it as, oh, it's a performance management tool. It's only for the underachievers. I don't want to touch that because it's got stigma attached to it, which we know is really quite harmful for coaching as a service, as an approach, as a discipline. So senior management selecting people for coaching rather than people volunteering themselves, and people not having time to meet for contracting and reviewing because that's time consuming in itself. So these are all problems that I've seen with the coaching apprentices that we work with. So I'm going to offer some practical solutions now on how you would perhaps manage some of these problems. So I want to offer you something called the 3 or 4 cornered contracting model. I referred to it in the brief as tripartite contracting, which is a similar thing. And this is something that Jenny Rogers goes through in her book, Coaching Skills. And this is one way to help manage some of those problems that was thrown up before. So what you've got here is your normal coachee dynamic. Yeah, so in your contracting, you're used to that if you're a trade coach, you've got a private practice. But when we coach in an organisation, we would want to bring in the manager of the coachee into the contracting. And I'll talk about how to do that in a minute. But also, you might have a keen HR professional who oversees the learning and development, and they might also want to be part of the contracting as well and oversee the process. So it all depends on the extent of the involvement from the employer, from the sponsor. But I would say at least you want the coach, coachee and manager contracting the HR professional if they are that keen and want involvement and oversight. So Jenny Rogers suggests the first stage is meet the boss stage. Now, by the way, I've offered this model to our coaching apprentices on their program, and they've not all followed it, because it's not worked. And some of them, for example, are the boss. They are the most senior person in the organisation. So for them, it's like, well, who is the boss? And they've had to adapt it a little bit. So I'm not saying that this is something you should follow. I'm saying it's a model that you can adapt and it can help support you with your contracting. But Jenny Rogers suggests if you meet the boss first and ask some open questions around what's your understanding of coaching first, to gauge whether they understand what this process involves, a bit like you would with a coachee, and what are the goals that you believe would be useful for the coachee to work from. So you're always gauging the sort of the manager's perspective and trying to see what they feel what they would see as success. So it's the contracting more as like you're doing with the coachee, but you're doing it with the manager. And then she suggests that you then bring in the client, so the coachee, and you have that boss, client, coach conversation with all 3 of you. And you would bring in the client because I guess what you wouldn't want is this talking behind someone's back. That client then needs to be able to hear what the manager's saying, and there needs to be some dialogue that you're facilitating between them to try and work something out that both parties feel comfortable and agree on. You've got to remember there's power dynamics going on. So when the coachee is in the room or on the call with the manager, there's possibility that they might be paying lip service and not being their authentic selves. So stage 3 offers the client an opportunity to talk to you as a coach without the manager. So you can finalize, engage if this is something they genuinely and willingly want to explore. And once that process is complete, you have hopefully some alignment with goals so that you know what success looks like at the end, which means stage 4, reviewing the coaching at the end of the session, has a framework. You revisit what you agreed at the beginning, that all parties were involved in, and you then at the end, based on the terms of confidentiality that you've agreed, discuss with the manager and bring the manager back into the meeting and talk about some kind of success that has happened. So that's a loose framework to follow of how to manage the contracting within an organisation. And the chapter in Jenny Rogers' book goes into much more detail. So if you are interested in knowing more about that, I highly recommend the book. But remember that coaching education for managers is also key. So it's important, especially if you're rolling this out to more than one coachee or employee. Managers need to know what coaching is. They need to know what contracting is, and they need to know how the process works. So if this is just a small pilot, that could be done in the contracting. But if it's a larger pilot, then it needs an education piece, which is why HR professionals are important to bring in, where the managers are given some training around what this looks like. So I think as you scale it up, that education piece becomes more and more important. And of course, we have an obligation to show a return on investment, because if we're going into an organisation and we're using their time and resources, they'll naturally want to know, well, how will we know if what we're paying out, whether it's in time or energy or money, is successful? So on the level 5 coaching apprenticeship, we teach something called Kirkpatrick's 4-level training evaluation model, which offers 4 different levels of return on investment, so that our apprentices, depending on the time and capacity they've got, can look at return on investment at 4 different levels. And level 1 is reaction, and I'll go through what these are in a minute. Level 2 is learning. Level 3 is behaviour, and level 4 is results. So level 1 is really what we do as coaches when we're collecting feedback. It's collecting feedback and using that to improve future sessions. So maybe through a survey or some questions at the end. Did you feel the session was worth your time? What are the strengths and weaknesses? What are the most important things you learned during the session? So this is almost like a reiteration process where you're collecting feedback after each session and you're reiterating it. And we might do this naturally as coaches anyway. I know when I work with a coach, a very good one, she does this with me every session. I send her the feedback and she reiterates that next session. So this is one way of sort of demonstrating return on investment, just collecting those that first feedback at different points throughout the series. Level 2 takes it up a notch, and it asks you to maybe look at this at the beginning and at the end. So if the manager has a specific focus, like a key performance area, that some kind of test is done at the beginning, and I don't mean like a sit-down exam test. Maybe a KPI is looked at, and then it's looked at the beginning and the end. Maybe I'm thinking about teachers here. An observation is done by the manager of the teacher at the beginning, and then an observation at the end to see if there's been any improvement. So this is to see if any learning's taken place over time, and there needs to be a metric in place. Level 3 is using the managers as a metric. So asking the managers to provide feedback at the beginning and end, and that could be done through interviews with managers, or the managers could conduct observations and feedback to you, or the managers might say, yeah, at the end in the review, this is what I've observed, this is the return on impact I've seen as a manager. So level 3 is managers feeding back on changes in behaviours, and that can be done through interviews or one-to-ones. And then level 4 is, if you've got time, and a lot of our apprentices do this, but it is quite time consuming, it's collecting all that data and analysing it. So at this stage, your results are analysed and outcomes are highlighted that have been good for the organisation and team. So we pull out, right, what have we got here that looks like added value to the business? Right, okay, so this is what we've found. Now, what are the organisational goals? How is that feeding into them? So this is more strategic, it's quite analytical, and it's more time consuming because you've got to gather the data and then you've got to link it to the organisational goals. So it's more high level. And what I'm offering you here is some ideas of how you might demonstrate your return on investment to your sponsors if you're an external coach, or if you're an internal coach, to your senior stakeholders to get more buy-in. And people choose different levels depending on capacity. If you're part of an organisation that provides external coaching, so you go work for an external coaching organisation, like, I'm just thinking Better Up is a big one, isn't it? There's other smaller ones. They might already have these systems in place, so you just go in and do the coaching and you follow their systems. But if you're an external coach, you might have to set up your own return on investment systems, and this is a model that you could use to do that. So we've gone through quite a lot today. We've looked at the different roles that you might have as a coach in an organisation, how to contract, and some return on investment models. I'm going to now just show you the application, how the application of this looks in the workplace by referring to some of our alumni at CVP. So we've had quite a few go through the apprenticeship now and complete the level 5 coaching professional apprenticeship, which is a level 5. Just to put that into context, it's more like a degree in the UK, a level 5. And just to put faces to and sort of bring this to life a little bit, here's a sample of some of our learners who have gone through the apprenticeship. They've come from different sectors such as recruitment, education, hospitality, and in the apprenticeship you can complete an outcome of either a pass or distinction. So we've had quite a few distinctions, which is great. And I just want to share with you how some of these internal coaches have shown return on investment through their coaching. So one graduate managed to accelerate the early career teacher induction program. So by embedding coaching into training of new teachers, teachers were able to progress faster through their early career teaching program because of the support that was put in place. A HR leader on the course designed a new mentor program. So although mentoring is different to coaching, they embedded coaching approaches into it, such as active listening, reflective practice, and smart goal setting, so that she was able to upskill the workforce using her coaching skills. It's increased confidence in some of the apprentices because they've realised, oh, actually, I completed a level 5 here in coaching. What else can I do? And someone went on to complete their CIPD after the apprenticeship. And many have received a promotion because of the excellent work that they've demonstrated through coaching, being competent coaching leaders. And the feedback they've collected, so just to go back to Kirkpatrick's model, if we were to look at level 3, someone who used that level 3 model found from a manager that because of the coaching that their direct report had received, the person was managing the time better, productivity remained at high standard, but they felt like they were less stressed because they were receiving that time from someone to hold space. The coaching apprentice who completed the coaching apprenticeship said that their management style has evolved drastically because of coaching. So they were able to be more vulnerable with the team and drive difficult conversations and be more in tune with what motivates them. They adapted their one-to-ones to have more structure, so everyone leaves with a sense of achievement. And another one rolled out coaching across the wider business. So they worked after the apprenticeship, or they're working now with HR to identify where the gaps in our managers across the organisation who can't complete the apprenticeship because it's time consuming, and how can we upskill them through other means. And the people who were coached have reported back that coaching's helped them accountable for their own goals. And having someone outside my team is helpful because I can open up more. So some of the coaching apprentices coach people outside of their teams. And just having that non-judgment and that space eased up the pressure. And they explored sort of this idea that perfectionism is a limiting belief, and considered where they wanted to be in their job and finding actionable steps to get there. So this is just some of the examples of return on investment that we're seeing in our organisations because of coaching. And that leads me on, just as I sort of wrap this up before the Q&A, to our level 5 coaching professional apprenticeship. It looks a little bit like this. It's a 12-month programme, and it embeds elements like observed practice, but masterclasses, which are similar to the themes that you might learn on the Animas course, but they're more driven towards organisational coaching. So although we teach tools like transactional analysis, narrative coaching, we look at how that can be done in a organisational setting, and we teach things like return on investment models and tripartite contracting. And I think the nice thing about the apprenticeship is it's a workplace qualification. So we don't just teach and leave them to it. We teach a module and then we tutor them to reiterate it in their context. So it's not like, here's some theory, go away, practice it. It's, here's some theory, go away, practice it, come back and tell us how it is, and we'll support you in adapting that to work with your context. It needs the support of the employer. So the way the apprenticeship works is you can access the funding only if you work in England. So you have to work in England and your employer has to support it, and you have to work at minimum 16 hours per week. So if you meet those 3 criteria, you can access the free funding to become a qualified coach. And we teach in alignment with the ICF, the Association of Coaching, and the EMCC standards. If you're interested in that, or you know someone who's interested in it, I'll share the details at the end. But I do just want to offer you a free resource if you are still interested in organisational coaching, and that is our organisational coaching health check. So if I just share that slide with you, this is something we share with our apprentices, and it's essentially a bit of an audit for you to do if you work in an organisation, or if you're doing any consultancy, or you're a coach working with an organisation, you want to establish their reality. It uses Carol Wilson's 3 pillars of coaching as a framework. And what you do is just complete it with a leader or a senior stakeholder, or as a leader or senior stakeholder, to establish where you are within your coaching community, within your organisation as a coaching culture. So there are some questions, there's a scale there, and there's an opportunity to do some reflections at the end. And it's quite a useful tool just to see where you are at the moment as an organisation in terms of your coaching culture. So if you would like that, then you can email info@cvpgroup.co.uk, and you just need to put organisational health check in the subject matter, and we will email you the organisational health check along with the slides from this masterclass. But also, if I can write in the chat, I'll just pop that in the chat as well. So that's a Google form. So if you don't want to email and you want to just fill out that Google form instead, that Google form asks you for your name, your surname, and your email. And we will email you the organisational health check. So you can either fill out the Google form in the chat or email us and we'll send it through to you. Our next enrolment dates are as follows. So October the 8th is pretty much filled now, and that's for our diverse educators. So we have different cohorts. Just to give you some context, we have a women leaders in education cohort. We have diverse educators. We have a hospitality cohort, but we also have mixed groups for anyone from any sector. So it doesn't matter what your sector is, or your background, we do mixed ones. And our next mixed one is the 21st of January. So if you are interested, you can register your interest by going to cvpgroup.co.uk/apply to register your details, and one of our team will be in touch. And if you want to connect, oh, the cat's woken up, scared her. Shush, we're nearly at the end now. If you would like to connect with me, I am on social media platforms, so CVP Group, and my website is there. I really love to extend my coaching network and connect with like-minded coaches. I can always learn so much from you. So if you do want to reach out to me, all my details are there on the website. But I think we've done quite well for time, because Izzy, we agreed, didn't we, at about 7 we'd open up for Q&A. And I think I'm just at the end now, so I'm ready for that. If you want to support the facilitation of that, how should we run it, Izzy?
Yeah, great. That was amazing. Thank you so much, Yasmin. So much insight in there. Yeah, so this next kind of 30 minutes will lead into a Q&A time. So if you just want to use the raise hand tool on Zoom, and Yasmin, you can pick people who have raised their hands, so it'll automatically bump people to the top, and you can do it that way. Or if you would prefer, I can pick them. It's up to you. And if people aren't comfortable sharing coming on live and asking a question, please do write a question in the chat, and I can ask those once we have finished the kind of verbal questions. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great. I've got, I'm just going to see, she will just, hello.
Oh,
She
very
woke up.
cute.
I'm just hoping that if I hold her, she'll shut up.
That is beautiful.
Well, I think it's setting realistic expectations with the sponsors from the outset. Coaching isn't the panacea, is it, to the problems that we're facing, first of all. And because it's something that is quite new and there's not a lot of, I feel, I've had a look, that the Randstad 2022 report is the most, I guess, robust research that I've found. So I'm happy, Warner, if you reach out to me for me to share that research with you, because maybe you can track that and find some expertise from the team that carried that out. But I think I always say, from my background in education, we go in and we say, look, coaching isn't going to solve our problems. And actually, from the small research that's carried out in education, we found that coaching doesn't improve retention.
Mm-hmm.
But we do say it's going to change culture. And it's going to bring into the workplace connection. And I think sometimes the qualitative research, the testimonials, the manager observations, the anecdotes is enough to serve the kind of the appetite of the senior stakeholders who have that appetite for, right, what's the return on investment? I haven't experienced senior stakeholders yet saying, well, where's the robust link here? We wanted this and you're not showing us this. They're saying, well, the anecdotes, the testimonies, the culture is different, and that seems to be enough for them. I think there needs to be more work on research to make it more robust, but at the moment, you're right, we're not quite there yet. So I hope that answers your question to some extent, and please do reach out to me, because I'm keen to share that Randstad research to see if maybe there's a line that you can use, a line of inquiry there that you could use to find out a bit more about that. As you're talking there, it just reminded me of something one of our coaching apprentices did, which was, look, at the end of the day, our leaders are busy. They've not got time to carry out this kind of research that I think is probably more your expertise. So what they did was pulled upon the Randstad 2022 report, which was a robust piece of research, and said, look, this is what the research is telling us. And then they went, and this is reflected, this is now being echoed through the testimonies or the observations or the data, that the small qualitative data that I'm collecting. So that's a nice way of doing it. Here's the big research that the experts are carrying out, and now I can see this echoed within my organisation through the small research that I've collected. Good, great question. Different points of view from different bodies and different people. You hear from some people who are either professional coaches, whether that's in organisations or not, that you're not supposed to coach your direct reports because of the conflict of interest. But I know my coaching apprentices, some of them do, and it has worked. So I would always say, never say this is right and this is wrong, because I think there's always opportunity, but it needs to be handled sensitively because it can go really wrong. So rather than guidelines, what I'm going to point you in the direction of is the need for supervision. So if you are engaging in coaching and you are wanting to do it in an ethical way, your employee supports that, it's important to have supervision in place, because that's where you, I think, find the right guidelines for your situation. So our coaching apprentices are lucky in the fact that they have access to that mentoring and supervision across the year. So they come to us and they go, but Yasmin, I don't know if I can coach this person because of this, and we do a supervision or mentoring session. So I would say have access to coaching, mentoring and supervision. And that should, I think, be enough for you to make the ethical decisions. I would, at the moment, the only thing that I can think of referring you to is Carol Wilson's work on reading the 10-point plan on creating a coaching culture. That's quite comprehensive. You've got that as well in your resources. I'd have a read of that, because I think she sets out how to sort of link it all up. But I would say with your experience on, if you've got someone who's an expert within the organisation doing something like a level 5 coaching apprenticeship, I think you have the skill set to speak with a member of HR around what coaching is and what it involves, to open up the conversation at least. And that's why I think what we need in organisations is coaching experts to be able to set that conversation up. So I guess that's the two things I would say there. Read the 10-point plan by Carol Wilson. See, I think you've got the skill set and knowledge to do that. Any other questions? So it's the Institute of Apprenticeship. So if you go on the Institute of Apprenticeship's website, they are the organisation who create the standard, which is the sort of the curriculum, and then it is externally assessed through an endpoint assessment organisation called NQual, and they are also accredited and aligned with the Institute of Apprenticeship. So the Institute of Apprenticeship creates standard, NQual are the organisation that formally sort of accredit and assess it. So contract templates, I think I would refer to the Jane Rogers chapter that I've referred to on page 142, 143. That's quite a good, there's quite a good template in there. It's not a template that I'm going to be sharing, but if you visit the CVP, if you email the info at cvp.co.uk, cvpgroup.co.uk, we can email you some examples of our templates. That's not a problem. So I would just recommend, if you want some examples, to email info@cvpgroup.co.uk and we'll send you some examples. We don't have them available on the websites, but I'm sure we can share them if some people want some examples. Yeah. Yeah, so you've contracted with, yes, you've contracted with the manager, but actually it's them that's a problem. I think that's why it's important to have oversight, a HR professional or a learning and development manager involved, because they are your go-to person if that is the case. So I would recommend ideally having a four-cornered contracting, so that you have got that other person if that is the case, and also making sure that you have access to supervision if you're finding problems like that. Yeah, sure. So Diverse Educators is a great organisation that is trying to support diversity in education. So what we found with coaching in education is a lot of the coaches seem to be in the same demographic. White females seem to be like a quite common demographic, and it isn't representative of the education community. We want people from different ethnic minorities, sexual orientations, backgrounds, and more neurodiverse coaches and diverse educators are working with CVP Group to make sure that our coaching community in education represents all different walks of life and isn't just the same demographic. So our diverse ed educators cohort, which is in October, but we'll have another one next year, is specifically for educators who want to be coaches, but we're making sure that they're from a range of backgrounds so that there is that representation in education. And if you're interested in more, just on the Diverse Educators website, there's some more details around that. So the link for the Google form is there. So that's what you complete if you would like to receive the organisational health check. And if you would like just to email info@CVP Group for things like the coaching contract or just any general information, that is in there as well. And then I guess I could also, just before we go, if you want to register your interest about the apprenticeship because you're interested in it for you or someone else, I'll put the register of interest form there, cvpgroup.co.uk/apply. Thank you. It was nice to see some familiar faces and also some of my old Animas alumni who I studied with. I think it's all Flynn. So it's just, and Joe, thanks for coming. So just thank you for some great questions and engagement. It's lovely to be invited to speak. Thank you.